Hello, everyone. Welcome to another study of Oahspe.com podcast video for YouTube. Copyright for YouTube. Today's subject will be the Earth's magnetosphere vortex. Now, I'm on my home page of studyofOASP.com and scrolling up to the top of the page. It says on the tab there, Home, Cycles, Astrophysics, Human Development, Study of Oahspe. And scrolling down back to the subject of the magnetosphere, vortex of the Earth. Okay, it says right here, Oahspe, Book of Cosmogony and Prophecy, chapter 1, verses 2, 5, and 8 says, The earth floateth in the midst of a vortex, the outer extremity of which is somewhat beyond the moon. And right here is an image of the Earth's vortex. And right there, now, verses 2, 5, and 8 of Book of Cosmogony and Prophecy, chapter 1 of Oahspe goes on to say, the outer rim, 42,000 miles broad, of the Earth's vortex. The greater diameter of the vortex is east and west. The lesser diameter is north and south. At this age of the comet, it showeth nearly the configuration of its own vortex, its tail being the invortexia. If it appear to the east of the sun, its tail turneth eastward. If west of the sun, it turneth westward. Now the invortexia was speaking of, its tail is right there. That's the vortexia that extends from the center outward. And then the vortexia, also called negative vortexia. The positive vortexia extends from the outer extreme toward the center. And the invortexia is pictured right there in red, a red line from the center going outward. And the positive vortexia right there from the outer extreme toward the center. And right there from this outer extreme toward the center. So those are the two types or two parts of the vortex. That part from the outer extreme to the center, and from the center out toward the end of the tail. Now Oahspe says that the vortex is somewhat beyond the moon. It says the outer extremity of which is somewhat beyond the moon. So that outer extremity that it's talking about is right there. Talking about going from the center out to the end of the tail. The end of the tail, which is right there, the Earth's magneto tail, just like the tail of a comet. And that's what it says right here in verse 8 of the book of Cosmogony and Prophecy, chapter 1. At this age of the comet, it showeth nearly the configuration of its own vortex, its tail being the M vortexia, or the negative vortexia, that goes out from the center to the end of the tail. That's the Earth's magnetotail. And as you can see, it goes out beyond the orbit of the moon. Right there it says, above image from NASA showing the tail of magnetosphere extends beyond the orbit of the moon. And the orbit of the moon is in a dashed line. Right there, dashed line. Or the orbit of the moon is actually in a circle. In a circle. And there you see the Earth's magnetotail. The tail of the vortex extends beyond the moon, beyond the orbit of the moon, from that NASA image, which I have a link to right there. And when you click on it, you get an enlarged, and there you can see right there, beyond the orbit of the moon, the Earth's magnetotail, the tail of the vortex. And right there it says the outer rim 42,000 miles broad. Now there's some skeptics who get the two mixed up. They think the 42,000 miles broad, and where it says the outer extremity of which is somewhat beyond the moon, they think it's talking about the same part of the Earth's vortex. And therefore, since the moon is more than 42,000 miles away from the Earth, they're saying that that information in Oahspe is incorrect. But that Oahspe is not talking about the same part of the vortex. The 42,000 miles broad, I'll show you in a little bit right here. Let me read this verse. It says, distances in the magnetosphere are often measured in Earth radii, with one Earth radius amounting to 3,960 miles. In these units, the distance from the Earth's center to the nose of the magnetosphere is about 10.5 RE, or Earth radii. 3,960 miles Earth radii times 10.5, which is the distance from the Earth's center to the nose of the magnetosphere, about 10.5 RE, Earth radii, equals 41,580 miles, equals distance from the Earth's center to the nose of the magnetosphere, equals 41,580 miles broad from the center of the Earth to the nose. So that's what it is referring to right there in the book of Cosmogony and Prophecy, chapter 1, where it says the outer rim 42,000 miles broad. So 41,580 miles divided by 42,000 equals 99% the same. Oahspe's number is extremely accurate. And to go along with that interpretation is the Oahspe Book of Knowledge, chapter 3, verse 12. And he measured the satellites and their distances from their central core, and he perceived the diameters of the vortices could be determined. And and that the words distances from their central corpora, diameters of the vortices could be determined. So that's the same as distance from the Earth's center to the nose of the magnetosphere is 41,580 miles, which is 99% the same of what Oahspe says here, the outer rim 42,000 miles broad. So now I'll show you what that's talking about right here. Broad, meaning the width from broad from the center of the earth out to the nose. Or to the circumference of the head of the vortex. 42,000 miles broad. So that's what it's referring to. Whereas where it says the outer extremity of the vortex is somewhat beyond the moon, that outer extremity is talking about the tail right there. It goes beyond the moon's orbit. That right there. From the center all the way out to the end of the tail goes beyond, because that's the magneto tail right there, goes beyond the moon. So there's no contradiction there between the 42,000 miles broad and the extremity of which is somewhat beyond the moon. Now, right here I write, below I have provided scientific sources to support my statement or statements. And this is research work I did back in the 1980s, around from 1985 to 1987. I started reading the book of, started reading Oahspe back in 1982. When I was 19 years old, and I started going to the library and doing research on and looking up scientific facts that matched what Oahspe was saying. And so right here from the book Exploring the Upper Atmosphere by Richard A. Craig, copyright 1968, pages 136 to 137. This was a book that I checked out of the library back in that mid 1980s. And it says in that book, the magnetosphere, on the side away from the sun, there is a much more extended region called a tail, which I was referring to earlier, which may reach out well beyond the moon. So there's that statement right there, which may reach out well beyond the moon. And then there's the statement right there in Oahspe where it says the outer extremity of which is somewhat beyond the moon. So there you have it. There's the scientific fact that backs up what is written in Oahspe. And it goes on further to say in that book, Exploring the Upper Atmosphere, on the side away from the sun, there is a much more extended region called a tail, and that is equal to the invortexia of the Earth's vortex, like a comet's tail. And that's where it says in Oahspe right there, at this age of the comet, it showeth nearly the configuration of its own vortex, its tail being the invortexia. So, right there. And right here, Earth's magnetotail extends well beyond the orbit of the moon. That's from nasa.gov. And here's the if you click on the link, here's the page that comes up right there, talking about the moon and the magneto tail. And it talks about NASA supported scientists. And it says here, Earth's magneto tail extends well beyond the orbit of the moon. And once a month, the moon orbits through it, says Tim Stubbs, a University of Maryland scientist working at the Goddard Space Flight Center. So there you go. So clicking back. Here it says Earth's magnetic bubble, the planet's magnetosphere, stretches, forming what's called the magneto tail. This tail reaches beyond the orbit of the moon. There again, that scientific fact that the tail of the magnetosphere or vortex of the Earth reaches beyond the orbit of the moon. And it's always pointed away from the sun. Pointed away from the sun. That's the same as where it says in Oahspe. It says, at this age of the comet, it showeth nearly the configuration of its own vortex, its tail being the invortexia. If it appears to the east of the sun, its tail turneth eastward. If west of the sun, it turneth westward, meaning away from the sun. Like what it said, what I read previously, and it's always pointed away from the sun. And there's the link to that. And when you click on it, it brings up the website talking about the Earth's magnetic tail. Okay. And right here it says picture of the Earth's magnetosphere with its long comet-like tail. That's the picture that I showed you earlier, a link to that. And Earth's magnetosphere, in parentheses, I put vortex, extending beyond the moon. Now I'm going to click on that link, and that's the picture that I showed you earlier of the Earth's magnetosphere from the NASA website, showing how it extends beyond the orbit of the moon. And going back, yeah, that was from nasa.gov images. And I wrote, how did Oahspe know that the tail of the Earth's magnetosphere extended beyond the moon and the width of the magnetosphere extended 42,000 miles broad from the Earth's center to the nose of the magnetosphere? Question mark, question mark. How did Oahspe know this when the magnetosphere, in parentheses vortex, is invisible and was not discovered until 1958 using space satellites? That's a good question. Clicking on that link right there. Okay, well, I'll have to update that link. But basically, that link contained the information of when the magnetosphere was discovered, which was in 1958 when they sent up the what was it, the Explorer 1 satellite, and it could detect magnetic fields, and it was able to detect this invisible magnetic field around the Earth that was comet shaped and of the size and shape that I showed you earlier in pictures, and that's when it was discovered. Now, right here it says science and earthbound spirits, the science of earthbound spirits. Just as the magnetosphere contains populations of charged particles that are trapped in the Earth's magnetic field, and that statement comes from nasa.gov, and I have an image there that the magnetosphere contains populations of charged particles that are trapped in the Earth's magnetic field. Well, so just as the magnetosphere contains that, the scientists have that's a scientific fact that there's these populations of charged particles that are trapped in the Earth's magnetic field. So does Oahspe say the vortex of the Earth contains populations of atmospheric spirits trapped in the lower heavens of the Earth. Just as charged particles are trapped in the Earth's magnetosphere, so are earthbound spirits trapped in the Earth's vortex. So there is a physics or a science to earthbound spirits that are bound to the Earth in the lower heavens. And here's a picture right here of two regions of charged particles trapped in the magnetosphere. There is an inner belt region where protons are trapped, and there is an outer belt region where electrons are trapped. And below that I have written, atmospherians reside in the lower heavens and are called bound spirits because they are bound to atmosphere till they are emancipated. And that's from the Oahspe Standard Edition.com, and I have a link to that. And underneath that, it says physical or corporal man is composed of atoms and molecules. The spirits of the dead are composed of subatomic matter. Subatomic matter, electrons and protons, right here that are pictured trapped, or the regions, the trapped regions pictured there, are subatomic particles, electrons and protons. And as I was reading, back to what I was reading, the spirits of the dead are composed of subatomic matter. Lower atmospherian spirits are composed of matter comparable in mass to protons and neutrons. Higher atmospherian spirits are composed of matter comparable in mass to electrons. Etherians are composed of matter comparable in mass smaller than an electron and are free from the power of the magnetosphere vortex. Now you can find more information on my website, studyofoahspe.com, about subatomic particles on, let's see, which page is that? Let's see, scrolling down. Right there. Right there, there's a page I have called Subatomic Particles, String Theory, Quantum, and GUT, which is the Grand Unification Theorem, or theory. And I have more information about subatomic particles there, and how the unseen worlds are made of these subatomic particles, and how the seen world is made from the unseen. Now back to what I was reading. Yeah, Etherians are composed of matter comparable in mass, smaller than an electron, and are free from the power of the magnetosphere vortex. Oahspe Book of Jehovah, chapter 4, verse 8. As the corporal man beholdeth corporal things, so doth the spiritual man follow upward the evaporated corporal entities of things. As corporal things are tangible to corporeans, so are S things tangible to the spirits of the dead. S means spirit, spirit, the unseen matter. Verse 10. As I made a limit to the ascent of the clouds, so made I a limit to the places of the different kinds of substances in atmosphere, the more subtle and potent to the extreme, and the more dense and impotent nearer to the earth. Now, right there, the more subtle and potent, or toward the extreme, that would be this region where electrons are trapped. Electrons are more subtle and potent than this region where protons are trapped in the inner region. Now, the definition of subtle, or the synonym, meaning words that are spelled different but mean the same or very similar. Subtle synonyms: ultra fine, minute, narrow, minuscule. And dense synonyms are thick and heavy. And I provide a link to both definitions or synonyms. Electrons are actually much smaller than protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons have masses which are equal to one atomic mass unit. Technically, they vary from each other slightly, but most classroom applications don't require you to use this information. The mass of an electron is about 1,800 the mass of a proton. So an electron is about 1,800 times smaller, or more subtle, or finer, more minute, more narrow, or more minuscule. Whereas the proton is more dense, thicker, heavier, more mass. So that statement in Oahspe where it says a limit to the places of the different kinds of substances in atmosphere, the more subtle and potent to the extreme would be the outer radiation belts right here. The more subtle and potent is the electron, which has 1,800 less mass than the proton. And where in Oahspe also says, and the more dense and impotent nearer to the earth. So right there, again, is the physics of that statement. The more dense, because the proton is thicker, heavier, has more mass. It's in the inner radiation belt region, and so closer to the earth, just like it says in Oahspe, the more dense and impotent nearer to the earth. Now, and I have a link to that statement talking about the sizes and masses of the electrons and protons and neutrons, the subatomic particles. And that link is right there. You can click on it for a reference on my website, the home page of studyofoahspe.com. And that link says socratic.org // questions / are protons and neutrons smaller than electrons. As you can see in the image above, the magnetosphere vortex of the Earth traps the more dense subatomic particle nearer to the Earth, and the more subtle subatomic particle to the more extreme regions away from the Earth. The Van Allen radiation belt extends typically extends typically from an altitude of 620 miles to 7,500 miles above the Earth. That's the inner. The outer belt is almost toroidal in shape, beginning at an altitude and extending to 13,000 to 60,000 kilometers, which is 8,100 to 37,300 miles above the Earth's surface. So as you can see there, the inner region is closer to the Earth, and the outer region is farther away from the Earth's surface. And it says here the belts are in the inner region of Earth's magnetosphere. They're inside of the Earth's magnetosphere, or the vortex of the Earth. And the link to that I have is wikipedia.org, and that talks about the Van Allen radiation belt, which is inside of the magnetosphere. And right here, you can see in this image, it says higher enlightened angel, pure light beings. See, they're farther away from the Earth. And then you have intermediary evolving beings, which have not gotten rid of their karma, that they have to purify themselves. And then you have the earthbound spirits, soul fragments. Then you have the incarnate beings, which are the corporeans. So you have the earthbound spirits and the intermediary spirits, or the atmospherians. And then you have the etherians, the enlightened angels, pure light beings, according to that illustration there. And then to the right of that illustration, you got Etheria, you got the third, second, and first heaven, and the earth. And that's from an image of one of Sela Shalom's YouTube videos. I used that to illustrate what I just said. And below that it says, Etherians who dwell in Etheria are spirits who have passed beyond, free from all earthly attractions, powers, and conditions, beyond the magnetosphere of a corporal planet. Now, synonyms for snowbound or earthbound mean blocked off, trapped. There's the word trapped. Just like you see that word right there, two regions of charged particles trapped in magnetosphere. Protons trapped in inner radiation belt. Electrons trapped in outer radiation belts. So a synonym for an earthbound spirit would be trapped or blocked off inside of the vortex or magnetosphere. And here it says discarnate, literally outside of the body. It is a synonym for ghost, spirit, or non-physical entity. Earthbound, the spirit or soul of a deceased person that for some reason is trapped on earth. There's that word again, trapped, and unable to spiritually evolve. Unable to move outside of that region to the Etherian regions at that time until they are purified. And that is from Introduction to Modern Spiritualism, page 18. And there I have a link to that. And it says, after clicking on link above, scroll down past direct reading and discarnate to read earthbound. And then I go on to, and then it says right here, it is as if John Blue Newbrough was in contact with someone who knew the dimensions of the Earth's magnetosphere in 1881. Now, right there in that image there, I have above left NASA image of Earth's magnetosphere. That's on the left right there. And right Oahspe drawing of planetary vortex. That's right there. And then it says very similar cone shape with nose and tail. See, that's very similar. And remember, that was not discovered until 1958. And there's more images showing the two. To the left, the NASA image of the Earth's magnetosphere, and to the right, that's the planetary vortex in Oahspe, on one of the plates of the Oahspe. I believe that's the Tau Sang plate. And you see right there. Above on left is NASA image of Earth's magnetosphere. On right is planetary vortex. Plate 47, Tau Sang of Oahspe, God's Book of Ben. Yeah, I was right. It was from Tau Sang. Shape of planetary vortex outlined in red. The magnetosphere shows the size and cone shape with nose and tail of the Earth's vortex, better than any scientific publication of a gravitational field. Because there are some who say the Earth's vortex is referring to the gravitational field. But the magnetosphere shows the size, shape of the Earth's vortex as described in Oahspe better than any scientific publication of a gravitational field. Because there are many scientific publications, as I've shown you some of them, of the Earth's magnetosphere, and they correspond exactly to the descriptions of the Earth's vortex in Oahspe, whereas gravitational field descriptions and publications do not. The magnetosphere has been detected and measured by instruments that can detect magnetic fields or magnetism. And Oahspe says magnetism, the manifestation of vortexian currents. Oahspe Book of Cosmogony and Prophecy 3, verse 11. And Oahspe says, no substance of attraction, nor is there any substance of gravitation. These powers are the manifestation of vortexia. That's from Oahspe Book of Cosmology and Prophecy, chapter 1, verse 45. The magnetosphere is a same size, same shape manifestation of the Earth's vortex. So it is the magnetosphere, which is the scientific evidence, a scientific fact that backs up the statements in Oahspe about the Earth's vortex. Now, below that on my webpage, it says magnetic vortex, experimental proof. Again, experimental proof. The video link here shows experimental proof of the existence of a magnetic vortex. The direction of rotation changes when magnetic polarity is reversed. Usually we see magnetic field lines shown as being straight back from one end of the magnet to the other. Correctly, what should be shown is magnetic lines of force in a vortex configuration. I'll read that again. Correctly, what should be shown is magnetic lines of force in a vortex configuration, with flow spiraling into the magnet or out of it in a right hand or left hand turning motion depending on the magnetic polarity. And that's from the web link that I have there, and you click on it, and there it is, magnetic vortex experimental proof. And right there, there is a link, there is a video, said magnetic vortex experimental proof, and I'm going to click on the video.
The magnetic vortex by experience, but using neodymium magnets. It's rotating like gravity vortex, Coriolis principle, but it is applied for magnetic field. This is a proof that vortex exists in the magnetic field. Okay, it's rotating. I'm not doing nothing. It's just a magnet. Hydraulics make start to rotate. This is the way of discovering the routine study by the praxis. It's a practical appliance. It's a way to study if it is true. The mathematical model should respect the practical model. Okay? This is the magnetic vortex. If I change the polarity, it starts to change the hydraulics. Okay? Now I'm going to upper, 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 upper. And what's happened? Starts to rotate, rotate. I'm going to change polarity. Change polarity of the field. Okay? It is rotating against. It rotates. It's like the North Pole and the South Pole of the planet. In the South Pole, rotates in clockwise. If you change, it will change also the rotation. I'm going to change again.
Okay, and clicking back, and you can see the full video and watch the full video from my website. And I have a link to it there, just as I showed you part of it there. But that's the experimental proof of the magnetic vortex, which is which correlates to what I was saying, that the Earth's magnetosphere is the Earth's vortex. Now here, right here, it says magnetic vortex spin proof. Magnetic vortex spin proof. And I'm going to click on that YouTube link and show you that video that I have on my website as proof of the magnetic vortex. In this experimental proofs that I've shown you, it applies to the Earth's magnetosphere also, which is a manifestation of the Earth's vortex as described in Oahspe.
This is a response to the Lorentz deflection. This is a magnetic vortex spin that This is a response to the Lorentz deflection. This is a magnetic vortex spin that is shown. This is a response to the Lorentz deflection. This is a magnetic vortex spin that is shown on this video, except there is no magnetic vortex spin due to the Lorentz transformation in this clip. It doesn't exist because that's not a magnet underwater. This is showing a magnetic vortex spin because this is a magnet. This is a chrome-plated neodymium magnet. The purpose of this video was to show that, in fact, there's an alternative to the Kapanaza ferrite core that could be used. It's possible to use a magnet, a neodymium magnet, to induce a vortex, possibly in the building of the Kapanaza device. And to the person who criticizes that this is just a simple Lorentz transformation, you have missed the point. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this response video. Have a good day.
Okay, and there's that video that showed the magnetic vortex spin proof. And it says right below that, the EM, electromagnetic force, is incomparably stronger than the gravitational force. So, as I was saying before, the magnetic force is a stronger representation of the Earth's vortex than a gravitational field force. And there's a link to that from physics.usyd.edu.au. And let me click on that link. Okay, it's a PDF file, and I'm not going to click on that right now, but you can go to the studyofoasp.com website on the home page and click that link and read the PDF file on that. And right there it says, Comet Kohoutek, like most comets, exhibits a similar kind of shape as the cavity called the magnetosphere. The cavity is formed around the Earth. Right there you see that comet. And there's the Tau Sang plate showing the solar system vortex with the planetary vortex inside of it, including the Earth's vortex. And interestingly enough, in 1997, when I was a part of a astronomy club and email list, it says one of the astronomers on there said, and I'll read, an astronomer in 1997 said, quote, the Oahspe author has described the interaction of presumably the solar vortex with planetary or cometary vortices and deduced correctly what the effect of solar emanations on a diffuse spherical structure would be. So he was just stating a scientific fact about what the Oahspe author had described in Oahspe and had correctly deduced or described the effects of solar and planetary magnetosphere vortex structures. So that is all for today, and of study of Oahspe.com. Thank you.